You know, one of the issues that I've become concerned about over time is this issue of the lack of regularity or consistency in the discussions between U.S. and Taiwan on the Taiwan Relations Act requirements to provide for the articles for Taiwan's defense needs. I had the legislation to reaffirm the act that passed the House and transfer the four guided missile frigates to Taiwan. And I've been down on some of those frigates, one of them, to see it outfitted. And so we're moving forward. But there isn't any consistency to this dialogue. And under the act, I would interpret it as sort of requiring that. So I would urge the administration to look at that. But there's a couple aspects of this. When you look at cyber attacks, no country is more targeted than Taiwan. And so there is an area also where the United States, I think, has a certain responsibility to assist in helping Taiwan deter these cyber attacks. I just would give you an opportunity to comment on that if you want. And then I know on the discussion to support Taiwan's indigenous submarine program with the Navy, is there a plan to allow the U.S. Navy and defense industries here to support Taiwan's indigenous program there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess what I would mention with regard to the ongoing conversations in the defense area, I mean, we have more than doubled the number of sort of working level contacts that we have with Taiwan in this space. We also have under the Obama administration and which is coincident, of course, with the administration of Ma Ying-jeou in Taiwan, we have also increased markedly the number of high-level exchanges that we've had back and forth. On the defense sector in particular, I think I would prefer to respond to your questions in detail in the closed session, but let me assure you that we are working with Taiwan very closely on all of the issues that you raised.
And the F-16 issue that Mr. Sherman also raised, I think, is also of concern. One of the objectives that I think we've all had who've looked at Taiwan's economic strength is that its inclusion in TPP would allow Taiwan greater diversification in terms of its exports. Out of Kaohsiung and Tainan, you see what they produce, and also would allow for greater imports around the Pacific Rim. And also, obviously, if Taiwan gets a seat at the table for the second round, it could also help Taiwan protect its long-term interests should we do a transatlantic agreement with Europe, because then it could be folded in eventually if it's folded into the Pacific Rim. I assume the long-term goal here, as I understand it, is an agreement with very high standards. And a high standard agreement serves the interests of the United States. There's really two different competing theories on liberalized trade. One theory, for those who believe in trade, but one theory is that you would try to drive policies with free trade and no standards. The United States doesn't benefit under that. We benefit under the rule of law, the establishment of the rule of law. And Taiwan is advantaged by a high standard agreement. Increasingly, as we travel, and I think we've had 4 trips of our delegation to Asia in the last 3 years, we hear this feedback across Southeast Asia and East Asia that, somebody needs to be pushing this concept of very high standards on intellectual property protections and all of indigenous innovation, all these issues that we're mutually concerned about and that the Europeans are also concerned about. And that if we get a major transatlantic and Pacific Rim agreement, we will have the ability to enforce that. But if Taiwan doesn't have that seat at the table and doesn't get to diversify its imports and exports, then I think this would be problematic. And that's why I keep encouraging our administration and the government to move forward on getting the base bilateral investment agreement done. How do things look on that front?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We do know, of course, that Taiwan has expressed interest in joining high standards trade agreements, regional agreements, in part because it's so good at enforcing and holds itself up to high rule of law standards. Also because of the concern that they have about diversification of their economy and wanting to ensure that they're integrated into the region, and also that they expand their network of trading partners so they don't become over-dependent on one particular trading partner. We certainly support that objective, generally that strategic objective that they have. As far as sort of our working with them, what we've said is that we want to work with them to get them ready to accede to a high standards trade and investment agreement in the future. And that's what we've been doing through the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement is they have already recognized that they have certain structural changes that they need to make in order to move in that direction. And we have told them that we will be happy to help them with that. First, by working on some of the structural and market access barriers that they already have that are going to be an impediment to them joining these high standards trade agreements, and then further down the road, helping them to prepare for that.
Thank you, Ms. Thornton. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.